Welcome to week 10 of Art 375. This week we explore eco activist art, works that confront climate change, environmental degradation, and our role in shaping the future. From performative maintenance art to sprawling installations on rising sea levels, eco activist artists provoke reflection and demand accountability. This form of activism sits at the intersection of aesthetics and advocacy. We'll look at both historical and contemporary responses, including global youth movements like Fridays for Future and artists who use nature as both medium and message. This week, we explore the intersection of visual art and environmental activism. Artists have long responded to ecological crisis, but today's eco-activist artists embrace public action, sustainable materials, and institutional critique. From personal gestures to global movements, these works aim to raise awareness and provoke change in the face of environmental collapse. Let's explore how art can help us rethink our relationship with the planet. Eco activist art refers to creative practices aimed at drawing attention to environmental issues, sustainability, and the effects of climate change. These works often move beyond traditional gallery settings and instead infiltrate public space, policy discussions, and grassroots movements. It's not just about nature themed art, it's about pushing for awareness, accountability, and action. While environmental art surged in the 1960s and 70s with the land art movement, its roots go back to Romanticism and 19th century landscape painting. However, contemporary eco artists critique exploitation rather than simply glorifying nature. Today's ecological art is often ephemeral, site specific, and directly confrontational. Mel Chin's Revival Field, 1990 to ongoing, uses plants to extract heavy metals from contaminated soil, a process called phytoremediation. This project sits on the border between science and art. Chin worked with scientists to select the right species for detoxification. It's not just symbolic, it actively cleans the land. Revival Field reframes the role of art from passive reflection to active environmental intervention, literally healing landscapes while raising awareness about toxicity and industrial waste. Agnes Dean's Wheatfield, A Confrontation, 1982, is one of the earliest and most iconic examples of eco art. She planted a golden wheat field on 2 acres of Manhattan landfill near Wall Street, transforming a wasteland into a statement on land use, capitalism, and sustainability. This act flipped urban expectations. Viewers were forced to confront what a city prioritizes. The harvest was later distributed globally, and the image became an emblem of environmental critique in the art world. In her landmark Touch Sanitation performance, Mirla Lederman Ukeles spent almost a year, July 1979 through June 1980, traveling across all 5 New York City boroughs, personally shaking hands with over 8,500 sanitation workers. For each handshake, she offered the same statement: "Thank you for keeping New York City alive." This ritual was unprecedented. It elevated invisible labor, bringing manual work and caregiving into the conceptual art realm. She reframed cleansing, garbage removal, and street maintenance as performance and public art, not decorative, but deeply political and feminist. Ukeles also created exhibitions around the performance, like the Touch Sanitation Show, 1984, which included installations titled Cleansing the Bad Names, where derogatory terms once used against sanitation workers were scrubbed off gallery windows by participants, symbolizing both acknowledgement and transformation. Her work was not passive observation, rather, it was active engagement, a protest with a handshake, a critique masked as gratitude, and a genuine effort to make maintenance visible. Ukulele's project remains a powerful example of eco-activist art. It centered care labor, public infrastructure, and dignity, not abstraction.
John Sabral collects toxic sludge from coal mines to create pigments for his vivid paintings. His toxic art series transforms environmental waste into beauty using pigments harvested from acid mine drainage. His process is both literal and metaphorical, converting destruction into creation. His work bridges activism, chemistry, and fine art. It shows how art can intervene in environmental issues, not just thematically, but materially, turning harm into healing. This image shows Fridays for Future activists in Sweden planting trees. These acts serve dual functions as reforestation efforts and as performative symbolic gestures. The connection between ecology and performance is central to many eco-artist practices. Actions like tree planting become metaphors for regeneration, hope, and direct response. The presence of youth in these actions further underlines the future-facing urgency of environmental art today.
In her landmark Touch Sanitation performance, Mirla Lederman Ukeles spent almost a year, July 1979 through June 1980, traveling across all 5 New York City boroughs, personally shaking hands with over 8,500 sanitation workers. For each handshake, she offered the same statement: "Thank you for keeping New York City alive." This ritual was unprecedented. It elevated invisible labor, bringing manual work and caregiving into the conceptual art realm. She reframed cleansing, garbage removal, and street maintenance as performance and public art, not decorative, but deeply political and feminist. Ukeles also created exhibitions around the performance, like the Touch Sanitation Show, 1984, which included installations titled Cleansing the Bad Names, where derogatory terms once used against sanitation workers were scrubbed off gallery windows by participants, symbolizing both acknowledgement and transformation. Her work was not passive observation, rather, it was active engagement, a protest with a handshake, a critique masked as gratitude, and a genuine effort to make maintenance visible. Ukeles' project remains a powerful example of eco-activist art. It centered care labor, public infrastructure, and dignity, not abstraction.
Chris Jordan's Midway, Message from the Dire, documents an ecological tragedy unfolding on Midway Atoll, a remote cluster of islands over 2,000 miles from any continent, yet fatally connected to global waste currents. In 2009, Jordan photographed thousands of baby albatross chicks whose stomachs were stuffed with brightly colored plastic items, lighters, toothbrushes, bottle caps, mistaken by their parents for food. Jordan photographed decomposing birds on the Midway Atoll filled with plastic debris. The images are heartbreaking yet hauntingly beautiful, confronting us with the scale of oceanic plastic pollution. He combines documentary photography with moral urgency. This isn't just about art, it's about consequence. He describes the experience as a macabre mirror, forcing viewers to confront humanity's toxic relationship with consumption. These images bring together data and grief. They reveal how global plastics downtime collapse into intimate tragedy. Jordan's work bridges art, environmental science, and moral reflection. It doesn't just show consequences, it embodies them. By presenting these visceral scenes with stark honesty, he inspires both sorrow and accountability. His work sparked a feature-length documentary and spurred educational curricula aimed at transforming eco-alienation into activism. In the context of eco-activist art, Midway exemplifies an aesthetic strategy that refuses abstraction. Statistics become symbols of loss, beauty becomes grief, and grief becomes a catalyst for change. It's an urgent message and one we can't ignore. Basha Ireland's Ice Receding, Books Reseeding is a poetic project that combines sculpture, environmental science, and literature. She carves books out of ice, embeds native seeds inside, and releases them into rivers. As the ice melts, the seeds scatter and grow. It's ephemeral, symbolic, and restorative. Ireland's work reflects a deep engagement with water, cycles of renewal, and the quiet resistance of regeneration, a gentle but radical call to ecological action.
Olafur Eliasson's Ice Watch debuted in October 2014 in Copenhagen's City Hall Square, coinciding with the UN IPCC's fifth assessment report. 12 massive blocks of Greenlandic glacial ice, each weighing between 1.5 and 5 tons, were arranged in a circular clock formation. This physical gesture was a literal timestamp on melting climate systems. Eliasson placed large chunks of melting glacial ice in public squares across Europe, allowing people to touch and watch them disappear. This visceral, time-based installation underscores the reality of climate change, making distant data palpable, felt, and mourned. It's a tactile warning bell. Visitors were invited to touch the ice, hear it crack, and watch it slowly melt, a visceral sensory confrontation with planetary change. Eliasson described it as making data visible through touch. This installation blurred art, science, and activism, forcing urban dwellers to experience ancient ice firsthand. The work was installed again in Paris during COP21 in December 2015 at the Place du Panthéon, where dancers moved among the melting blocks to embody their exhaustion and fragility. The same performance later reappeared in London, Tate Modern, 2018, underscoring the global scale of the climate crisis. While it has been criticized for the energy required to transport Arctic ice to cities, Eliasson argues that the emotional weight and immediacy of direct engagement outweigh abstract statistics. Ice Watch transforms ice from an icon of polar spectacle into a civic tool, urging public empathy and climate urgency through embodied experience.
The Canary Project produces visual media that addresses climate change and social justice. Their works include documentary photography, posters, and community interventions. Like the proverbial canary in the coal mine, these pieces serve as warnings, but also as calls to rethink, organize, and act. The Canary Project was founded in 2006 to use art and visual storytelling to address climate change. It produces exhibitions, photographs, and data visualizations that make climate science more relatable. Their projects often use minimalist aesthetics to highlight disappearing landscapes or future projections. By merging art with activism, the Canary Project aims to bypass climate fatigue and communicate urgency through beauty, empathy, and data-driven design. Xavier Cortada's Underwater HOA in 2018 in Miami used yard signs to show how sea level rise would submerge properties based on their elevation. Homeowners were asked to place signs with the number of feet above sea level on their lawns. It brought climate data into suburban landscapes, turning front yards into climate change awareness rooms. By involving residents directly, Cortada turned passive viewers into co-creators in environmental dialogue.
Natalie Jeremienko's Environmental Health Clinic, 2007 to ongoing, offers visitors prescriptions for environmental action: plant a tree, install birdhouse, monitor air quality. It reframes wellness as a communal and planetary issue. Instead of diagnosing individuals, she asks how the environment is sick and how we can intervene. The project blurs science, medicine, and public art, treating ecological health as something we all have a hand in maintaining. Jeremienko blurs art, science, and civic participation. Her clinic prescribes environmental actions instead of medicine. From urban farming to air quality sensors, she encourages people to experiment in their own ecosystems. Her art empowers public agency through playful, data driven interventions.
Future Farmers Victory Gardens of 2007 rebooted the 1940s wartime home gardening initiative in a modern eco-activist context. Between 2007 and 2009, artist Amy Franceschini and collaborators transformed vacant lots, rooftops, and front yards across San Francisco into demonstration garden plots equipped with starter kits consisting of soil, seedlings, drip irrigation, and tools delivered via human-powered garden trucks and recycled bike barrels. This San Francisco-based collective revived the concept of wartime victory gardens in a modern ecological context. They distributed the garden starter kits and educational resources, transforming idle lawns into food-producing plots. Their playful branding and civic outreach make this a prime example of activist design. What makes it radical is that Victory Gardens wasn't just symbolic, it built neighborhood food resilience through food production, seed sharing, and education. Workshops, planting parties, and printed posters invited diverse communities across climates and cultures to reclaim urban space and reconnect with food sovereignty. The food's aesthetic merges nostalgia and modern intervention. The slogan, "Use spades, not ships," echoed wartime rhetoric, while tools like pogo shovels and trikes conjured playful utopian imagery. Franceschini's goal was practical propaganda, engaging and beautiful enough to lure people in, yet grounded in civic change. Through Victory Gardens, Future Farmers reframed urban sustainability as collective action and design. It blurred art, activism, and agriculture, turning private yards into public statements and idle soil into seeds of resistance. Andrea Polai's Particle Falls is a public art projection that shows real-time air quality data as a cascading light waterfall. When pollution is low, the light is calm, and when it's high, the display becomes violent and red. The work literally visualizes invisible harm, turning data into visceral experience. Installed in urban spaces, it forces passers-by to see what they're breathing. Polai's work bridges technology, environmental science, and urban aesthetics. This fusion of art and environmental monitoring renders the invisible visible, revealing the health impact of pollution and turning city infrastructure into a warning system. This image of Extinction Rebellion youth activists in London speaks to the theatricality of protest. XR often uses costumes, props, and choreographed actions to amplify their message. Eco-activism is not just a political act, it's a visual one. XR's bright color palettes, slogans, and dramatic die-ins draw media attention and connect emotionally with audiences. This strategy borrows directly from activist art traditions while innovating for a digital age. Maya Lin's What is Missing is a powerful digital memorial to biodiversity loss. Instead of statues or tombstones, it's an interactive archive of extinct and endangered species. Lin, best known for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., brings that same minimalism and reverence to ecological grief. The project incorporates maps, videos, and soundscapes to visualize absence, what's been lost, what might yet be saved, and what stories still need telling. Jenny Kindler's Birds Watching features oversized eyes of endangered bird species printed on metal or fabric panels. Displayed in outdoor settings, the eyes silently watch passers-by, reversing the gaze. The project critiques the human tendency to look without seeing, especially when it comes to environmental loss. It's a haunting reminder that these creatures are witnesses to their own extinction. Are we brave enough to meet their gaze? This photo captures a Fridays for Future climate march in Berlin. Sparked by Greta Thunberg's school strike in 2018, this global youth movement uses visual protests, handmade signs, mass gatherings, and viral imagery to make their point. These events blur the lines between performance, protest, and public spectacle. The aesthetic of climate activism, often colorful, inclusive, and emotionally charged, has become a global art form in its own right, influencing artists and campaigns alike. Greta's own image has become iconic, appearing in posters, murals, and editorial illustrations. Like other political symbols before her, her likeness has transcended the person. Artists depict her with intensity, often channeling the seriousness of a prophet. She embodies youth resolve in the face of ecological collapse. Here's one example of using Greta Thunberg's image in art. This is from a friend of mine, Gary Paxley, who is a Canadian illustrator, and this is what he had to say about this piece. A few years ago, Greta gave Trump a disapproving stare that was felt around the world. We were all Greta in that moment. The admonishing look from a teen girl was more powerful than any of his political opponents, the media, or nations. It was the best protest in that moment from the youth delivered like a punch in the gut. I created this piece to honor Greta for her amazing stare, and all young people in the world who should know that they also have power against negative forces.
Zarya Foreman creates monumental pastel drawings of icebergs and glaciers, capturing them in hyperreal detail. Her work is meditative and elegiac, rendering these vanishing formations in loving clarity. Unlike photography, her handmade process emphasizes human presence, grief, and urgency. Zarya Foreman's melting landscapes are monumental pastel drawings born from repeated expeditions to Greenland, Svalbard, and Antarctica, often aboard NASA's IceBridge missions, where she photographs rapidly changing polar ice forms at low altitude. Rendered with extraordinary realism and scale, these works depict fracturing icebergs, shimmering glacial walls, and calm, moody seas. Each mark is physically built up, layer by layer, much like glaciers accrue over millennia. Foreman works with her fingers and pigment shards, bringing ethereal textures and cold blues into vivid three-dimensional presence. Her process is both artistic and scientific, as she collects data, sketches, and aerial photos during her travels, and then creates compositions that blend documentation and emotional resonance. Even as the ice changes, her drawings preserve moments lost to time. These works inhabit vulnerability and beauty simultaneously. Observers report that viewers draw closer, thinking that they're seeing a photograph, only to realize that it's pastel. This sense of tactile discovery deepens emotional engagement. In the context of eco-activist art, Foreman's drawings serve as elegies to vanishing environments. They invite contemplation, empathy, and urgency, helping translate polar abstraction into visceral connection and calling audiences to care before it's just a memory. Planet City imagines a radical solution to climate change. 10 billion people living in one hyper-dense, sustainable city, leaving the rest of the earth to recover. Created by filmmaker and architect Liam Young, the project blends fact and fiction, using climate data and urban modeling to reframe climate action as an ideological choice, not just a technological one. Commissioned for the NGV Triennial, the 15-minute film follows a continuous festival through the city, weaving global cultures, costumes, and architectures into a daily ritual. Young collaborated with designers, scientists, and artists like Anne Crabtree, Forrest Swords, and ML to craft a multi-sensory vision. As eco-activist art, Planet City functions like a Trojan horse, posing the provocative question, what if humanity chose density over sprawl to restore wild spaces? It isn't a literal blueprint, but poetic, urgent, and the question, what if, is meant to spark collective reimaginings of our future. Aviva Romani's The Blue Tree Symphony painted vertical blue sine waves on trees targeted for gas pipeline construction. She copyrighted the artwork, creating a legal obstacle to deforestation. This fusion of art and law as activism is brilliant. It also reframes land not just as a usable space, but as already inscribed with culture and resistance. Romani's approach combines beauty, defiance, and legal strategy in a single gesture. This sculpture is made from ocean plastic by the Washed Ashore Project and turns waste into awareness. These large-scale animal forms made of bottle caps, fishing nets, and trash collected from beaches educate the public about marine pollution. They're used in zoos, museums, and aquariums to connect viewers, especially children, with sustainability through play and shock. It's environmental education that's tactile, immediate, and impossible to ignore. Not all eco-art is effective. Critics warn of greenwashing, when environmental themes are used for aesthetic appeal without any real impact. Others point to the carbon footprint of large-scale installations. The best work balances intention, ethics, and ecological awareness with community and material choices. This slide examines the dark side of eco-art, where good intentions can mask superficial gestures. The featured greenwashing billboard installation deliberately mimics corporate language, commitment to sustainability, plastered over an actual landfill. It forces us to confront how environmental branding often obscures extraction, waste, and inequality. Critics warn that without community involvement or measurable impact, environmentally themed art can become symbolic decoration rather than meaningful intervention. For example, large-scale installations flown across continents may produce more emissions than they offset, and while a melting ice sculpture grabs headlines, does it drive policy change or just Instagram applause? Furthermore, eco-performances risk reinforcing privilege if they center on wealthy audiences. As Merle Laderman Euclides pointed out, maintenance and care work often done by marginalized communities deserve recognition, not just spectacle. Similarly, critique of projects like Future Farmers Victory Gardens sometimes points to access issues. Who can afford urban gardening kits? This is not to dismiss eco-art as ineffective, but to demand accountability. Effective eco-activist art must balance aesthetics with ethics, transparency, material honesty, community, labor, and ideally ecological outcomes. We should ask, does the artwork produce actual change or just comfort us? In the Anthropocene, good intentions are not enough. Justin Bryce Guariglia's We Are the Asteroid uses flashing LED signs like the ones used in highway construction zones to display poetic warnings. Lines like, "The Earth is a fine place and worth fighting for," appear amid urgent data. This collision of bureaucratic signage and existential language disrupts public space. Guariglia's text-based art updates protest for the attention economy, turning art into an interruption. Eco-activist art doesn't solve climate change, but it can shift hearts, spark debate, and change minds. In a time of crisis, it reminds us that data alone is not enough. We need empathy, imagination, and cultural narratives. Artists offer visions of warning and possibility. They plant seeds of transformation. To wrap up, eco-activist art doesn't just decorate, it agitates. It asks, what is our role in this crisis? What future are we imagining? Artists like Greta Thunberg, Agnes Dennis, and Maya Lin help visualize urgency, empathy, and action. They reimagine the Earth not just as a subject, but collaborator. From data to performance, from protest to quiet gestures of restoration, eco-art teaches us that sustainability begins with the seeing and then ends with the doing.